to another episode of ModOps Pod, the Modern Operations Podcast. On this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Doug Mooney from Apptio about how FinOps is changing the way companies measure the value of IT. Doug has some great insights from almost 2 decades in this space. I hope you find the conversation as interesting as I did. Hey, Doug, welcome and thanks for joining the podcast today. Appreciate you spending the time with us.
Well, thanks, Michael. Look forward to it. I've always enjoyed our conversations and glad to engage with you and your larger audience. So yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.
Very good. Well, one of the reasons that I mentioned this in the intro that I was excited about having you join today is, you've got so much experience in the technology business management space. And there's a lot of transformations there, and hopefully we'll cover quite a bit of that today. But part of what I'm interested in is what sort of got you into that space? What was exciting about the technology business management space that made you gravitate towards that?
For me, well, I've been in the technology industry 25, probably 30 years now, and have largely my career has been with systems integrators.
Okay.
Or creating and operating systems integration companies, starting small, getting big, mergers, acquisitions, and then scaling. And the fun of that for me was always the conversation with the executives about why. We had started off like many systems integrators, talking to the technology people, but the conversations got really interesting and the work got really interesting and gratifying. And we got connected to revenue streams when we were actually having business conversations. And for me, that combination of the technology, making it work, what's the purpose, and then being a part of delivering a top line result or something visible to the business was exciting. So the movement to Apptio was in part due to relationships I had, but also just an interest in, to be honest, the technology firms, or the technology organizations within a larger firm are really good at running the shop. But what they often lacked was sort of the business discipline, right? These technology divisions were running multi-$100 million budgets, sometimes $1 billion budgets. And it was on a spreadsheet and email, maybe SharePoint, and there just wasn't the discipline. It was a real gap. And so for me, that gap is an opportunity. So that's kind of how I got here.
No, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And certainly we've seen that in our own business as well. And we're a very technology focused company, but one of the things we oftentimes find ourselves in the middle of is, how do I help a technology leader build a roadmap that they can actually go and show results back to the business? We need to take these steps so that we can be successful in what you're asking us to do on the business side. And sort of the other piece of that oftentimes is making sure that we've helped them build the agility to address a business request.
Yeah.
And so that piece is challenging and can be even more challenging as you start thinking about the finance side of it. So yeah, it's an interesting space. I really have always enjoyed that space too. It's anytime you can find a way to draw a line between what a business outcome is and the technology you're investing to make it happen, makes it a much more interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So, so you mentioned that you've moved into the Apptio space. From your perspective, what has sort of changed over the last decade or so in the FinOps space, or I should say in technology business management? Part of that is clearly the evolution to what's now called FinOps.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I it is both what has changed and the underlying premise of what has stayed the same, right? Technology is always capturing, I don't know if the wave is the right word, but like what is current, what's the new driver, what's innovative. And so, FinOps is certainly, cloud and cloud financial management, and FinOps is a recent incarnation of that, but going back to the very beginning of technology business management, where it was started, probably in the virtualization days. Technology business management really was focused largely on, the on-prem colo kinds of spends, right? So your data centers, your people, your software, external labor. And as innovations have happened, the definition of technology business management has grown to include that.
Sure.
And so FinOps is a very robust sort of variation on that theme. But I think what's different is technology business management was largely about helping people understand and communicate, plan, and optimize based on what they'd already consumed and spent, right? This is what you did last week or last month or last
Yeah,
quarter. FinOps has a portion of that, but what was new and novel and kind of eye-popping was it didn't just answer the question of what did I consume and spend, but it also answers the question, and so what can I do about it?
sure.
And so that notion of both insight and the ability to start to take like real action, I think that's permeating out from just, the CSP space
Hmm.
to adjacent solutions to even, infusing kind of the larger world that we see via TBM. So I think the underlying premises are the same, and I think there's just increasing and very interesting overlap between the two disciplines.
Yeah,
I think it's a
abs-
great intersection. Sorry, Michael.
no, that's okay. One of the things that I really like about the FinOps movement the pieces of
Mhm.
that I've seen, and you're far more integrated with it than I have been, is just that ability to get such a clear trace between what it
Yeah,
is that I'm delivering on the technology side and what I'm spending or what it's costing me, that I can then get a real picture of what's my return on investment for my technology investment.
yeah, yeah. That is one of the strengths that line in lineage of what did I consume, what did
Mhm.
I spend, and to support what applications, what products, what services to what part of my customer base, whether that's internal or external. Yeah,
Sure.
but that lineage is far easier in the cloud space. And secondly, I think the nice part about it is it drives a new set of conversations, new accountability. So it gives an organization the ability to move fast and learn fast and then optimize, right? As an engineer, you always had to engineer for the busy hour. In the cloud space, you have opportunity to refine that very, very actively. So that's nice. That's a real benefit.
Yeah, that's a definitely a significant change to the way we think about technology, but then also about how we understand the
Mm,
cost of technology and how that reflects a return to the business. As businesses have started to adopt this FinOps process, for
sure.
sort of two-part question. One is sort of it from the outside looking in a little bit, it looks like FinOps has gotten far broader adoption than sort of some traditional technology business management approaches, partly because there's sort of a more central organization there. So I'm interested in why you think that is. And then secondly, what's holding people back from adopting it more comprehensively? The space, there clearly seems to be some good return on value for implementing some of these practices and tools. What's holding
Mhm.
people back?
Sure. So I think the adoption comes from the broad adoption of FinOps, say perhaps compared to technology business management. Much of the technology business management disciplines are focused on sort of the IT financial management team, right? So the CFO of IT or the IT focused specialists in the general organization. So it is a relatively narrow slice of the world who
Okay,
are deeply invested. FinOps is a real blend of financial professionals and operations and disciplines, as well as technical operations. So it's just a broader audience.
sure.
So I think that's part of it too. And you just look at the size of the activity at a reInvent, sort of the Microsoft events, et cetera. There's just massive audience involved in the cloud.
Sure.
I think the other part of it is what we were just talking about. In the cloud space, it is much easier to have that lineage and to have the ability to adjust quickly to see the connection between cost and value delivered and the insight are my unit costs, am I handling it that well, or is it the units being consumed, and what does that mean? So I think there's just far more ability to impact in the FinOps cloud space than there was in the past. Um, I think to your second question, why, perhaps are there, pockets and, why does it sometimes take longer to get? Part of it
Yeah.
is just cultural change, right?
Okay.
you know that, some engineers probably wouldn't appreciate, finance people looking under the covers and why. So you have to manage that, uh, kind of discussion and engagement gently and thoughtfully and all that. I think it's also just there's a level of busyness, right? People are moving fast, and in sort of this agile, product-driven, cloud-driven world, there's just too much to do, and so it gets a bit challenging for folks to kind of lift their head up and say, "Hey, wait, there is a larger community. It is developing standards. It's absolutely influencing all the products in the marketplace to raise the game," and so on. But I think from a broad perspective, those are some of the things that are driving FinOps. But I just watching the level of adoption from where it was when Cloudability was purchased by Apptio. That's when I first became aware of FinOps. To see how it has grown since then, it's a matter, it's a question of time, really. It's just the trajectory is amazing.
Yeah. Are you seeing some integration? You mentioned the productization of IT, kind of this idea that the DevOps cycle is building products, that product ownership sort of paradigm. Have you seen, how does FinOps sort of fit into that? Is FinOps making that easier? Is FinOps easier to adopt because of that process?
So good question. So I think FinOps is positively impacting the DevOps cycle. There's certainly overlap. That's the intent. But
sure.
Maybe to back up a bit, some of the basic tenets of FinOps are that you centralize the cloud governance, cloud financial management activities that should be centralized, right? So you centralize reporting, you centralize commitment making. But on the other hand, you make it easy to distribute insights at the point of action. So you give the DevOps teams the insights they need to make better decisions, right? So inform them upfront of what a financial impact of a design decision could be. Let's make that easy. Or day two, once something is live, how do we learn quick and adapt? Let's make it easy for the DevOps engineers to see the performance implications of design decisions. Should something be on a small, medium, or large, or what version of technology should it be on? Let's give a range of options, like risk-weighted options, for them to make a decision. And what's the financial impact? And if they're driving good financial discipline, let's capture that and record that back to the organization so the organization can say, hey, that team is doing really well. This team looks like it needs support.
Right.
Kind of build the business discipline of optimizing constantly, learning, applying.
I love that. I mean, that is so in line with what the real virtue of DevOps is that ability to get consistent metrics, to be able to make good choices about how things are optimized, both in terms of performance, availability, reliability, but also in terms of cost and sort of the return on investment. And we're so often seeing that challenge where I often talk about the fact that the idea of DevOps originally was you write it, you run it, and that somehow we had in our heads that people who were really great at writing UX were also going to be really great at patching code. And that didn't ever really come together, right? But the way DevOps has sort of materialized, where the teams are responsible for making sure that the infrastructure delivers all of those non-functional things we always think about: reliability, availability, scalability, all those things, and to weave the financial piece into that. To me, that is one of the biggest virtues of FinOps from a technologist perspective. It's so you almost can't say no to it. You almost don't want to say no to it, because I've got another tool as an engineer that actually allows me to do what I'm already doing in yet another domain really well, and I can demonstrate value back to the business, demonstrate value in what I'm doing. So it's just, we're in a really interesting space right now.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I agree. And fundamentally in their DNA, the engineers I know hate waste, and that includes hate wasting money.
Absolutely.
And they are like, the priority is on delivering the product on time, and it's got to work, and it's got to wow, and all that. But they also know in the back of their minds that wasting money is just not a good thing. So if you make it easy for them, if you embed it in their discipline, give them the data, the insights where they work, so much the better.
Okay.
There's also the other side of it. If an organization doesn't have good financial governance, the DevOps team doesn't want that to spin out of control so that the brakes are put on their work, right? It is,
Absolutely.
back in the early days of cloud, even to this day, we still sometimes have conversations with prospective clients and they're like, hey, I had budgeted 40 million. We've spent 48 and it's only October. We have to put the brakes on. And nobody wants that. In this
Right.
day and age, it's unnecessary. It's far easier to get ahead of that
Mhm.
and communicate what's going on. And do you need to curtail activity? Do you need to go get more budget because it's a net positive for your organization? But to give the DevOps team, the engineering organization, the ability to manage that, to be good stewards of the company's money while they're delivering great product. Again, it's a way to evolve and mature their practice. It becomes them more business partners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so related to that then, I'm curious from your perspective why IBM sort of stepped into this space, right? IBM, if you break down the acronym, is International Business Machine. So there's always been sort of a business slant to everything that IBM has done with technology.
Sure.
And if you go way back to the mainframe, accounting for cost and whatever else is a core built-in part of what they do. I'm interested in sort of your perspective on why IBM chose to sort of step in this space with Apptio and cloudability.
I think it's severalfold. And, given the valuation they put on the firm, there should be several really solid reasons. And I think they have them. I think what they saw in us, as we had worked together, collaborated in the marketplace together at a couple of significant customers, and they saw some things that they really liked.
Yeah.
One, I think, was the fact that, particularly through TBM, and then as FinOps came along, we were having very different conversations with the same clients than they were, right? So
Sure.
IBM has solutions and systems that manage systems, but they may not necessarily have been having the conversation with the CIO and about, well, how do you run the business
Right.
of your tech organization? So I think that different level of conversation and who we were speaking to just opened up doors for them. They were like,
Sure.
that's a whole line of people we've never spoken with. And then I think as well, Apptio has always been a SaaS organization.
Sure.
We're really very successful at that. And IBM has portions of SaaS in its makeup, but perhaps they hadn't really scaled it to the level that they wanted. So they looked at the discipline and how we operate a SaaS business and said, hey, Apptio, we could learn from that. Let's pull you into our business and let's learn and let's apply best practices.
Yeah.
What they brought to us was kind of funny. It was a two-part kind of conversation that, they were like, hey, help us understand how to run and scale a SaaS business.
Sure.
And we'll show you how to hire at scale. Because we had always been kind of, bootstrapping and, entrepreneurial, and we had our public market phase, and that was always exciting. And then, we were in private equity who took good care of us, but we had always never been able to grow the staff the way we needed to.
Sure.
So we were acquired in November a year ago, and by January, we had open headcount slots and filling over 100 people, 100 new roles into our product development.
Yeah.
Which is all about innovation, which for someone who works with customers the way I do, that's where it's at. The pace of our innovation, our releases has doubled year over year, and that's just phenomenal. So anyway, I think it's the conversations that we were having, of course, the solution we bring, the insights in how to run and scale a SaaS business. And for us, it's all about scale. We were a mid-sized organization, and with IBM, basically the world is our oyster, right? The world's open to us. So go get it.
Well, that's a wonderful. I mean, that's a good synergy for sure when that happens, is that ability to have a really solid conversation with the marketplace and then be able to partner up with an organization like an IBM that can help scale that. One of the things that I think we can't have a podcast without talking about AI, so I'm going to talk about it just a little bit now. But one of the things that you have talked about quite a bit is the conversation that FinOps allows the technology organization to have with the business. And in the AI space, that's the thing that we're seeing a ton of is it started out as a lot of almost consumer facing. We really took something that had been around there for a while. I always joke that ChatGPT 3.5 was the version that everybody hears about. That means there was a 1.0 and a 2.0 and a 3.0 before anybody ever even thought of putting a chat front end on it so you could interact with it in a way that made sense. Well, that's one way to talk to generative AI, but then there's a whole other world of what can happen with generative AI that businesses are really starting to explore and frankly challenged to get the ROI on that they expected. I think Gartner and a couple of other organizations published statistics in the last year, something like 80% of generative AI products fail to get the ROI that was expected. So there's got to be a role for FinOps in the AI space. And I'm interested in what your perspective is on that.
There absolutely is. And I would say that, to those Gartner statistics, yes, absolutely. There are experiments that are run, and I think organizations are doing what they should do. Let's figure this out. Let's get our hands dirty. What is the time to market? What's the impact we could have, right? So I think in this early stage of impacting such a broad swath of the economy, what part of our economy isn't touched and driven by technology, right? Yeah. So if you think of something that could be so pervasive, there's going to be a lot of experimentation and failure and zero value, deferred value, soft value. I think, so I think how the Apptio product sets can fit into that is, we're very good at helping an organization understand, again, what are they consuming, what are they spending, and how does that line up to basic, tiers of the organization. So how does all that flow to a subset of the technology organization, to what products and applications, and then to, who are the consumers at the end, the internal business units and the external. And so whether it was virtualization years ago or cloud or now AI, that's sort of what we do. We combine operational and financial data to help organizations run their cadences, right? So the monthly cadence and the quarterly, but also to run point analysis, right? So what are we spending? What value does it bring? How can we optimize? So we bring all that together. So it's not just what are you spending on GPUs? That's easy. But what are you spending around InfoSec and, ethics and governance and internal staff and external staff. So we could pull together not only the unit costs and the total cost of ownership, but then if you start to add in other operational data, you could say, so here's the value, right? Sure. Here's the impact on what we've seen from a cost of, cost per inquiry, daily average user, those kind of more business metrics that the organization cares about. Time to serve, et cetera. So I think helping an organization understand this wave is perfectly natural for Apptio and our ecosystem to understand and help customers adopt. AI is moving fast, so again, a customer has to move quick. They have to move with confidence. You have to make sure that there aren't multiple versions of the numbers, multiple stories. Everything has to be defensible. So if you use an enterprise class system like Apptio, you make a lot of that noise go away, a lot of the mechanical work, and you let folks focus on the conversation that matters. Are we spending in the right way? Are we learning the lessons? Are we clear about the value of our past investments? Most importantly, have we learned the lessons to drive smarter choices going forward?
Well, it seems to me like AI almost becomes a logical place to go explore FinOps if you haven't before. That sort of pivot where there's a little bit more attention on being able to draw the line you just described. Are you seeing increased adoption? And sort of maybe as a related to that, what is the adoption process? What's the lift to go from I'm using a spreadsheet in SharePoint, to use your early example, to using an enterprise class tool to better understand what's going on inside of my organization?
I think we constantly see growth. So our organization is, thankfully has, that's the fun part, right? It's been a very strong growth trajectory. So that's always good. And the emphasis, has shifted over time. You know, FinOps certainly is a big driver these days because for so many reasons. I would say what we're seeing now is a real focus on helping a customer really understand what are they spending to operate their business, right? So
Okay.
kind of where you come from, modern
Yeah.
operations, right? Like what's the true expense there? How's it, manifesting itself? One of the smart things we can do to convert that to grow the business. So that run versus grow dynamic, that dialogue, that's an absolutely big part of what we're seeing because that grow the business becomes obviously investments that are AI and the agile product teams, et cetera. So that's a big part of what we're seeing. And then also this notion of addressable spend as
Sure.
transforming so many of my platforms and so many of my products and solutions. That means things should be sunsetted. So understanding not only the financial and the operational, but the contractual horizon. When do the supporting contracts and commitments end? So I
Yeah.
can budget that money should be moved elsewhere. So it's kind of mid-tier practical, but those are the realities. People need to understand when can they harvest the money from their transformations to kind of continue to fuel that trajectory, pushing up the innovation curve.
Absolutely. Well, makes sense. Anything you would want to make sure that folks who are going to adopt a FinOps tool or get more deeply involved in FinOps practices or just technology business management more broadly, what are the things that you would encourage them to think about as sort of high priority items as they take that journey?
Sure. I would say oftentimes in the conversations we're having, folks will say, well, my data isn't really ready. Like I don't
Yeah,
have a good handle on X, Y, and Z.
sure.
And the fact is, nobody really does at the beginning of the journey, right?
Yeah,
And so don't wait for that. And certainly don't wait for perfect. It
right.
is an iterative process. And to be honest with you, the value is not necessarily so much standing up software,
Hmm.
particularly in the early months. It's more in the conversations you end up driving.
Sure.
And so kind of the guidance I would have is, if you're starting to move into the financial management sides of a transformation, is to understand that it is a discussion. This is the way we used to do it. How do we want it in the future? How do we mitigate the impact on, the folks involved? So I think it's more know that it is sort of a multi-step and there's value to be had all along the way. But but don't talk yourself into stopping or pushing it off till tomorrow. I
Yeah,
think getting started today is, um, well, there's no better time than the present, and the data is never perfect. There's never the right moment. Your teams are never not busy,
yeah,
right? So I think starting the journey makes sense.
yeah. No, and I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I think I couldn't agree with you more, and that applies to a lot of the things we do, right? Just get started, try things iteratively, build yourself a roadmap. You're not going to have every step of the way figured out ahead of time, but you're going to be moving directionally in the right way, and understanding your alignment between finance and the business and technology is a direction I think everybody needs to move. So, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate you joining me today. It was a great conversation. Hope you'll join me again at some point in the future. And I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Michael. I enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for giving me the opportunity, and I appreciate your audience's participation, and their involvement. So have a good one. Take care, Michael.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of ModOps Pod, the Modern Operations Podcast. In this episode, we explored FinOps with Doug Mooney, and I hope you found it as valuable as I did. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And as always, follow Evolving Solutions on LinkedIn to stay up to date with the latest episodes.